everybody. It's Raina here from Blue Cypress Books, and welcome to Book Banter. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Tonight, I will be talking to Robert Fieseler. He is the author of Tinderbox, The Untold Story of the Upstairs Lounge Fire and the Rise of Gay Liberation. This book won multiple awards, including the Edgar Award for Best Fact Crime and the Lambda Literary Award for Emerging New Writers, and so many more. Robert has a list of accolades all to his own, but to introduce him, I really want to just read the first line of his bio on his website. Robert Fieseler is a journalist who investigates marginalized groups and an author who excavates forgotten histories. If that isn't beautiful writing, I don't know what is, and I can't wait to get into all of that and his book and what he's working on now with him. And if anyone has any questions as we go along, please type them in the comments and we will answer them in real time. So without further ado, Robert, hi.
Hi team.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing well, I think. I'm glad to be here and talking books. I really like the video opener because I love your guys' bookstore and I love that you featured the cat.
I mean, she wouldn't let us film a video in the store and not be featured, so she made the cut.
I love it.
Sure, exactly.
That's good. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is nice.
Excellent. So can you tell me, I would like I ask for people like to give me the elevator pitch, but I mean, give me the couple of sentences. What is your book to you if you are telling someone about it?
My book, Tinderbox?
Yes, Tinderbox is where we're going to start. Yes. Yeah,
we can start there. So I do have an elevator pitch just because like when you give these sort of talks, I'll click into automatic and I'll just go. So it's a nonfiction account of a notoriously unsolved arson fire that took place at a gay bar in 1973 New Orleans, and it claimed 32 lives. It was the deadliest fire on record in New Orleans history and the worst mass killing of homosexuals in U.S. history until the 2016 massacre at Pulse. It was an intentional crime at this upstairs lounge, a bar called the Upstairs Lounge on the fringe of the New Orleans French Quarter that was solvable. But despite an orgy of evidence that was presented pointing towards a chief suspect who was an internally conflicted gay for pay hustler named Roger Dale Nunez, despite all that evidence being there, this tragedy, this crime was deemed politically inconvenient in its day due to queer overtones, and thus permitted to become the historic mystery that it is now. The Upstairs Lounge is still considered an unsolved crime. So did you see what I did? Like literally, like my brain went to a place where there's information and it like sought it out. But like you asked me what the book means to me.
Yeah, so that was amazing because that's your elevator pitch. I love it. Like if you want
to know what the book means to me.
I absolutely do. Like if you're telling a friend about your book.
Okay, I say like I wrote this book that changed my life and taught me how to write books. That was it was the first instance where I delved into queer marginalized history. I'd never written about the queer community before, even though I am a queer person. And this was the book that taught me what history is and also what history means and what memory means. I used to think that history was this like inert thing that where we learn about the past and we sort of file that information away. And now that my process of writing Tinderbox and then also continually, I don't want to say being forced to talk about it, but like continually talking about it in the past essentially 5 years since the book has come out, has taught me that history is this active, very present thing, that memory is alive, and that the act of memory allows us to, in some small ways, enact small measures of justice towards historic inequities and historic tragedies. Meaning like, by us talking about Tinderbox and the subject of Tinderbox, the Upstairs Lounge Fire, now we change and alter our contemporary legacy to the past. And the way that we change and alter our legacy to the past can be very positive or it can be negative depending on the context. But I've seen like so many things involving the upstairs lounge story alter and shift over time through our conversing about something that was once a forgotten or absent narrative within New Orleans' broader storytelling culture into more of a present narrative within the rubric of all the stories that make New Orleans the city that it is. So like, it's changed my mind about everything I ever used to think about what a story is and why we tell sad stories from the past, because this is a sad story. And what the purpose of such a visitation with difficult material is. Meaning it's not just because like we want to be a downer. It's not because, and it's not like because I want to be like the one gay guy at a gay bar who gets real with all the people just trying to get ass on apps. You know what I mean? They're being like, I'm trying to get laid. I'm not trying to learn about my past. But like, it's about the reality that informs our current life, and that informs even every queer conversation we have. So that's that's what I tell people when I tell people about my first book.
Well, okay. I love it. And I love that. So when you got started writing this, your idea of what history was is different than when you, as it went along. You realize it's like a living, breathing thing.
Right. And it changes. And also like contemporary society changes in its relationship to this past notion, which I think is meaningful. Like, it's not like we can go back and change an awful thing that happened in the past, but we can alter our relationship to past tragedies to say like, this can never happen again. It's important that we remember. It's important that we respect and observe it year to year. It's important that we take steps to forswear and say, well, institutionally, we'll never go back there again. And I think all that's meaningful.
I absolutely agree. And institutionally, but also like interpersonally. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more it's out there, the more we even know what it is to not repeat it or to repeat it. Like, I mean, depending on what you use your information, what we're talking about. But yeah, if you hide it, or if it just happens and then the news cycle goes through, and after the week, you barely ever mention it again, then what have we done? What have we really, like, as a people, like, it happened and then we're done. It doesn't, it does evolve. And I wonder two things. When did you saw that evolution as you were writing the book, as the history is evolving and the stories are being told and retold? But then since the book has come out, have you noticed that as well? Like the history of it is changing. Yeah.
Yes and yes. So in the middle of writing Tinderbox, the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. And what happened there is that the upstairs lounge fire became supplanted by a tragedy that had a higher death count. Not that that was a record ever mentioned, right? It's not like a bragging point. It's actually, it's awful. It's terrible that such a thing occurred. And in the days that followed the Pulse nightclub shooting, there was this sort of grasping for context and seeking any sort of historic baseline for how populations faced calamities of this nature that struck the queer community. And inevitably, people, they're not just people, but scholars, media outlets, average ordinary citizens began to compare and contrast the two events. And so in a strange way, after the Pulse nightclub shooting, the upstairs lounge became a very big conversation in the national and international queer community. And then, and so what happened with that was that I was in the midst of writing this book. I had you have to seek out sources to utilize. And I was trying to seek out survivors of the fire, also witnesses to the fire, some of whom were very, very reticent to share their very painful memories. Yeah. And in some individuals that had been up to a 2.5, maybe year and a half to 2.5 year text message, email dance, where they told me they just don't think they could. And those same individuals who'd given me sad, reluctant no's, but no's, then at the day after the Pulse nightclub shooting called me up and said they wanted to provide their testimony because they see in a wider context that it could be useful. and that what pain they would experience would have a broader purpose to provide comfort and succor, if possible, to individuals who were grieving contemporaneously after the Orlando event. And so that was really meaningful and interesting. And so like all of a sudden this sort of the event changed there for me, and that changed the book. And then after I published Tinderbox, well, gosh, so much stuff happened. Like at the 45th anniversary of the tragedy was a very large observance in New Orleans. There was a memorial service at St. Mark's Church on Rampart Street on the edge of the French Quarter, and newly elected Mayor LaToya Cantrell turned up to speak and recognize the upstairs. And regardless of how one feels about Cantrell, like this was the first instance where a mayor turned up at an upstairs lounge anniversary event to participate in the observance of the tragedy and to recognize it as part of city history. And that was very meaningful. And then pretty much every event I've given, because the upstairs lounge story was so buried, so absent from New Orleans society, and so verboten to talk about, and even in straight or queer contexts, almost every reading or historical lecture or just a get together that involves this, someone will come up to me and tell me something new. That's
amazing. Yeah. That really is amazing that like after this much time and doing as many events as I know you've done and all of this, that you still have people coming out and going, oh, I remember this, or, you know, I live next to this person that there's this connection. And I mean, New Orleans, I always say New Orleans is like a big little city where it is very connected and people know people who know people. You know, you feel like you're always like just a couple of degrees away from almost anything that happens in the city. But you get this opportunity to kind of go out there, and then there's a little group of people, and one of them is somehow connected to, has a story that fits into this, into this bigger. And
I don't know why, but then usually that context sparks there and motivates them to want to like unburden something, and it'll be relevant. And I'll be like, what do I do with this? Like, I wish it's like beyond that. I wish that I had it in the book. Like Rose Little, who was the sister of upstairs lounge victim Clarence McCloskey. So she came to one of the events that I did in Hammond, because she lives in Hammond now. And she's this like late 80s woman with a walker that like, you know, cried and wanted a hug, and then was telling me all about her brother and how he worked at the Circle Mart and like the various careers he had. And there still is like not a ton of scholarship about upstairs lounge victim Clarence McCloskey and what was his life was. And he lived in Mid-City and his family was multi-generational there. And she told me that he was denied a Catholic burial at their church in Mid-City. I think it was St. Rose de Lima, which isn't a church anymore. And I think it's like an arts center.
I think so too.
And that was like big because for years, upstairs lounge scholars have been trying to say the Catholic Church refused proper burial rights, but they couldn't cite a specific concrete example of one of the victims being denied a Catholic funeral by his or her home parish. And here was a clear-cut example. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do with it now? What do I do with this piece of information? But that's all part of the challenge. And that's all part of the ongoing story where I try to let other scholars know. Sometimes I write journalistic pieces based off of all of this stuff. I don't know. There's various ways to do it, but that is a constant. There'll be some break in the case. And I thought like, oh, there'll never be more. There's always more information.
Always more. So you kind of like touched on this from the historical aspect, but when you decided to get into this and you started uncovering these pieces and you started putting this together, did you have any idea it was going to sort of take over? I mean, any good research project is going to take over your life for a certain period of time, but like here we are, you know, and it's still very, like you said, it's still very relevant, and you still have people coming out of the woodwork to share these experiences with you. And to me, it almost feels like it's accepted to share these pieces of information. Like the story you just told, Rose, right, is that she has been holding on to this. Like there's probably only been a very small number of people that she could share this with. And then you walked right into her town with a big sign that says, hey, come talk to me about this story.
Yeah.
And here she is. She can share this with you. So did you anticipate that at all?
No, I thought what usually happens when you write a book is it comes out, you tour it promotionally for a few months, even if it's a history book, and then it sort of goes away and there's an award season, which there'll be a little bit more interest, but then usually you're on to your next topic.
Right.
And it's not this ongoing level of scholarly discourse and also journalistic discovery. And it's not usually like this sort of like an ongoing commitment where the book keeps demanding you, even as like, like maybe how long a person like me starts to question, how long should I occupy this role? Is this appropriate? When do how do I best occupy this role if it's not even something I choose, but it's just something where like I acknowledge my ongoing responsibility, and then how do I honor that responsibility? And then also like, how do I try to utilize what keeps coming at me to do good in the upstairs lounge awareness and advocacy role? And then also, how do I also preserve stuff and put it in places where I can hand it off to some next generation that will I know inevitably will come and will want to do their own thing and have their own set of explorations into this very incredibly complex, incredibly sad, and at the same time, incredibly fascinating, botched event that was a solvable crime where it was most individuals could have been identified. Some of them were not, like 3 were not identified and buried in this potter's field. A person who was identified was buried in the potter's field too, with the unidentifieds, etc. So there's just like this, there are these like hanging aspects to the tragedy that like will constantly bother a curious scholar, and that they're almost like puzzles that people want to solve. So no, I didn't expect any of that would happen. And I had to ask my like mentors about it. And none of them knew what to tell me. It's good. Like when you write a thing, you want it to be bigger than you and more important than you. At least that's what I do. I don't want to be ever more important than the subject matter of the work. And like, so I like decided that I was going to sort of, in any instance where the advocacy became a thing, or how do I highlight this event more and sort of find some way to mute my own role? And then like, as I mute my own role more and more, how do I then transition to my next queer history project, or, gracefully, without feeling like I've like not fulfilled what I'm supposed to fulfill when I put out a book like this.
Well, and I wonder if you would have, not to put more pressure on you if you haven't thought about this, but like there's certain people who are now looking to you as an expert on this. And I will cite something I noticed on your social media like a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, and it wasn't that long, where they were doing some road work or sidewalk work down by the upstairs lounge, and there's now a plaque like in the sidewalk.
Right. And
people were concerned that they might tear it up and called you.
Right. And so, I gotta go.
Right. And you are an author, a historian who, you have nothing to do with public works. You have nothing to do with anything that could, other than stand on the plaque and maybe have a phone number in your cell phone to call somebody.
Right.
You're not a person who's going to stop a bulldozer.
I know.
But at the same time, you're now this expert in to certain people where they're like, you will be vested in doing something about this.
Right. So and this is something I get in this argument with my husband all the time for. He's like, why did you have to go? And I was like, because I've got calls from multiple people. They're worried about the plaque. And then of course I care. That plaque went down on the 30th anniversary of the fire. The community itself put it there. it was a long journey for any sort of marker to be placed in front of the historic location. So like it's in my nightmares that Entergy tears up, like some functionary at Entergy tears up that his piece of history in its own right that was like embedded in the city of New Orleans. So of course I'm going to run like towards there, and no one else. There are going to be scenarios where others don't know what to do. There are other scenarios where I'm just part of a team. So like this next coming summer is the 50th anniversary of the Upstairs Lounge tragedy. And there's a community consortium that's come together to put together public programming and also to have observances. And I'm grateful to only be like one of a larger group that's responsible for all of that, because it should be more than just one voice. But oftentimes, like, this stuff will occur. And it's not just to me. Like, there's an Upstairs Lounge scholar who's my mentor named Clayton Dallery. People will approach Clayton with, like, I can't tell you how many movie scripts someone will have written, or a one-act play, or, like, different kinds of various kinds of artistic works where they want, like, some sort of a informal consideration or consultation. And we'll both feel obligated to read the stuff and tell the person what we think.
Man, I can't imagine a one-act play that could do this justice.
Yeah. There's a really good one. It was written I'm from a Chicago suburb called Naperville, and there was a high school senior that wrote, she was a freshman. She wrote a one-act play about, in essence, the trauma of loss. And it was about, though in her one-act play, her name's Claire, it was probably the best theatrical piece I've read on the Upstairs Lounge. I was like, I didn't think this would happen, but but I read it and I was like, oh my gosh. So it was about a group of New Orleans friends are sitting in a room and they're talking about what happened the past year, and they're mentioning the Upstairs Lounge fire. And then one by one, people leave the room without explanation. And at some point you realize that this is a person that is sitting alone in the room by themselves, who are reimagining and is living with their dead friends. And it's about, and it evokes like the reality of what grief is, which is that the dead do never leave us. They are with us in vestiges of memory. And in some cases it's visceral. In some cases it's just sort of thematic or emotional or poetic. But anyway, this was a one-act play written by like a high school freshman from my hometown, and I was crying by the end of it. I was like, oh my gosh, you're so and now she's at Harvard. She's so talented. But like like that stuff happens all the time where you're asked to weigh in or whatever, and it's usually considered like an honor.
Definitely.
But like also like, if you're gonna make artwork about like a sad piece of history, please make it be good art. Like, and I know there's no definition.
You can't, right? You're reading it all, no matter what. Like, you're like, oh, okay.
Please make it tasteful, and I know that that's subjective too. But honestly, I have been provoked, and so has my mentor Clayton several times, where we're like, "What do? You asked for my opinion, so I'm going to give it." But also, like, I have to be nice. Like, I'm from the Midwest. I have to be nice.
You have to find the right words to say, oh, honey, no.
That was what my husband is a painter and a sculptor, and he had an arts teacher who was a mentor named Mary Ellen Strom. And what she would always say to students, she goes, "It's not good, honey." Like it's
okay. It's okay. Just keep trying.
Look, it just wasn't good, honey. Like, it's just like that. Like, it's a sort of like, well, good. Sometimes you have to write the bad piece or make the bad painting to make it. Yeah, and then we can't ever define what makes excellence in art. All I can say is that it does exist.
Yeah, it is out there. It's out there. It's there.
Right.
So when you were writing, like, you finished Tinderbox, it came out, you did the typical book, tour.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, usually that dies down and people start working on what are you doing next?
So
did you get the opportunity to do that and then get pulled back into
That happened, yeah. So like my ability to write my second book proposal totally got delayed by the fact that the promotional campaigns and also the opportunities to talk about the Upstairs Lounge continued for about a year and a half, unabated. Like it just kept going to the point where my husband was like, "I will divorce you if you keep doing these free promotional talks or whatever." And so eventually I had to like put a cap on it. Because I was like, at first I was like, this is my responsibility. I put out this book. I want the message out there. Then I'm like, I don't know, these dreams don't pay the bills. Like I gotta find some way. And like, and beyond that, like I had to like, the goal is when you're a book writer is you do well enough at a book so that you can keep writing more books. And you don't want to just be like, have one book in your oeuvre. That's not really an oeuvre or anything like that. You want to be able to fill up like a small part of a bookshelf by the end of your life. And so like I was trying to, at first I didn't know what idea I wanted to do. Do I want to write another queer book? Then I found an idea and I'm like, well, then how do I sell it? And then it took me about 6 months to write the book proposal. In nonfiction writing, you write a proposal that's a business document that's about the size of a book anyway, to try to convince a publisher that you're serious and to have them give you an advance that will.
You're not going to just Google a couple of things and put it together.
Right. It's enough to like for the publisher to give you an advance that'll fund the research. And then even after you're done, you have your proposal, someone has to buy it. Like it's like, so that's a 6-month process too. And then right as that happened, like as I was ready to start my research on my second book, COVID happened and all the archives closed. So I was like, oh my God. So I had to find other stuff. And then I was I'm like the only person who ever celebrated probably that the Florida State Archives in Tallahassee opened again. And I was there on the day, almost to the day it opened. I was the happiest gay person ever to be driving to Tallahassee, Florida. And
I'm from Florida.
Well, I mean, a lot of people from Florida hate Florida too, but it's a complex state. It's really beautiful. And then it's like this bellwether state for essentially national sentiment and especially towards queerness and also national sentiment against queerness. So like, I want to be like, I was curious, like what's with that state? Why do they keep coming up with they produce these Anita Bryants or these other people, or like they had this anti-gay adoption law? Why do they dislike queer folks so much? Don't they have Key West and St. Pete? And then like, if you've ever been down to Wilton Manor, that's just like a gay village. It's like a gay retirement zone.
It really is. I can't help you with that. Even though I was born and raised there, I lived there for 26 years. I couldn't help you at all with that answer.
Yeah.
I also have questions.
Yeah.
But what took you to Florida? What's your next project?
My next book is about the Florida Johns Committee, which is deeper in our queer past. And it's like the precursor to Anita Bryant, the precursor even to modern Don't Say Gay educational movement, which was this 9-year-long anti-queer, anti-Black purge that occurred from 1956 to 1965 in Florida under the guise of anti-communism. And it was this legislative committee with a bunch of white segregationist Southern Democrats who decided that they were going to investigate and go after anyone who was politically convenient to attack. And first they went after the NAACP, and then when to try to prove they were all communists. And when that didn't work, they tried to go after educators to prove that the educators were communist. And when that stopped working, they were like, well, you're not a communist, but you are closeted gay, and I caught you. So then they started outing the teachers and forcing them to be fired. And it was this 9-year-long roving investigation that never had a purpose, but it was rampant with violations of civil liberties and privacy. They could even get your medical records at various stages, and left this wide swath of damage that nobody knows about, because when they stopped existing in 1965, they sealed the records. And then when they finally opened up the records in 1993 under the Florida Sunshine Laws and all that sort of stuff, they censored the original documents and redacted the name of every victim.
Oh, of course
they destroyed it. They mutilated the history. So people like academics know about it, but even a lot of Floridians don't know about how deep the seeds of anti-queerness and anti-Blackness were planted in the culture of that state through this 9-year-long free-for-all that was done by state legislators, in essence, because they wanted to maintain power for a few more years after Brown v. Board of Education, and they wanted to scare people and show them that white leadership was necessary. What a state. What a flippin' state.
Yeah. Well, and they just, Florida does that a lot where they sort of make it up, where exactly like what you're saying. So we're going to just make a committee. It's going to be great. We'll use the word committee so no one will argue about it. People love committees, and well, this is okay now and that's okay. But, it's not okay. Communism. Okay. So let's just put that, everybody will be on board.
It's like, you're bad. Communism. I'm going to find right. It's like, you're bad. I'm going to find out why. You know what? I'm going to look long enough and hard enough and I'm going to find out why you're bad.
Right. No one really understands communism anyway. So we could just tell them that it's about this.
Right.
That. Right.
And I don't know if you've done any digging into this, but there really were in the 50s and 60s Soviet spies. But guess what? This Florida State Committee never found a single one of them, never arrested, never outed a single. These spies are too the psyops of international spycraft is going to be caught by some segregationist podunk person. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, they're not hiding in some elementary school, in Southwest Florida, trying to teach your kid to read some book that you don't like. That's not what they're doing with their time. So, yeah.
No, that's not their way to destabilize American society, as Southern segregationists were claiming. Because there was this claim that Marxism in the end wants us all to bone each other. That doesn't even make sense, but wants to attack and wants to bring about the disintegration of the American family. And it's all these side arguments that ultimately just led to, in the 50s and 60s, the Florida public being shocked whenever they figured out that the junior high school female gym teacher was a lesbian, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And these people were ruined in this farce. They were destroyed. They were outed oftentimes in the newspaper. The reason they lost their teaching certification and the reason they lost their teaching certification was published. And then the state of Florida would mail out to neighboring states lists of all the people blacklisted from education. And so this followed people throughout their entire lives. And it was absolutely disgusting and should be known more. It should be known more. It's one of those weird things where I write these books or research these books and I'm this seems it's I find parallels to contemporary action, and I wasn't finding it for a little while, and then all of a sudden all the Don't Say Gay stuff occurred, and I was just man, it's almost sad that I can find these parallels, and that it seems once a generation, someone in Florida will remember that you can win a lot of political support by stirring up fear against the indoctrination of children, and then you can demonize whoever you want in the process.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things in the name of protecting children, and people would just jump on board without asking a second question. And
yes,
blows my mind. I have a child, and that blows my mind.
Right. That's I think that's right now, that's the working first line of the book, where which is, I'm not supposed to give, but I will, which is, there was little a white man couldn't do in the name of the law in 20th century Florida. It's crazy what you can do in the name of the law.
Right.
And when you get into these interrogations of people where people are trying to I wonder how anyone talks to any law enforcement member without an attorney present. I've been schooled not to swear. I'm not going to swear an oath. I'm not going to do anything.
Look, I have watched enough television. I don't even need to read historical documents. I have watched enough television to know I would like to speak to my lawyer.
I know. Law and Order will teach you that. Law and Order will teach you that.
Yes. They don't say it in all 500 billion episodes, and they just made it up, right? At this point, I'd just be look, I saw it on TV. I don't know how real it is, but I'm just going to wait on this.
Right.
Wait. I don't know where I was. I don't know when I was. What? Excuse me? Lawyer.
Right.
Nothing. I'm not saying anything.
Right. I totally agree. If that's all that anyone takes away from this talk, I'm so happy they've taken that away from that.
Yes.
Because like you can't, nothing you say to a member of law enforcement can be used for you in a court of law. It can only be used against you.
Because
so the whole idea that
the other side is collecting the data. They're not going to take the data and give it to you to use for yourself. It is all, you're giving it to the other side.
Yeah. It's nuts. The whole idea of like when you're sat down in an interrogation room and they're like, just help us out a little bit and we can all go home. That's like how you can see historically, this is how Black men and women were pressured into confessions when they never committed crimes. This is how queer folk whose privacy were being rampantly violated had their careers ruined forever, including like great professors at the University of Florida, the geographer that like defined North Florida and South Florida and was like the man that loved Florida more than anyone else. He was a guy that he was writing the Atlas of Florida. The guy's name was Sig Dietrich. That man was outed and ruined by the state of Florida. It's nuts.
No. Yeah. And to me, one of the really sad parts is you start talking about this committee and telling me different things about it. And you could have said it was in the 80s. You could have said it was in the early 2000s, to be honest. Right. And other than the word communism, I would be like, okay, like right. I believe you if you said that, because it's probably happening right now to some degree.
Yeah, it's like, what's the hot button term of the decade? In the early 2000s, you could say terrorist, right? Now it's woke, right?
Yeah, in Florida especially.
And in like in the you could say anything in the midst of the AIDS scare, and get others to be like, yeah, we should really get a handle on that.
Yep.
And in the 70s, all you had to imply, you had to say, Anita Bryant said, children. Like
that's it. Well, okay, I'm on board. And that is maybe the saddest part. Maybe that is the saddest part. It's not the. I don't know if it's the scariest part, but like it's one of the sad parts. And hopefully this book does as well as Tinderbox has, and you get this opportunity to really bring this to life, and I'm going to say give it another life, but not bring it back, but like, bring it to light and have people talk about it. Because I think one of the things that people don't realize is that we have been doing these things for so long. These things have been happening for so long. There's two pieces where you're putting a face with a random event, and you do an amazing job with that, by the way. Making these are real people. Every single person who was in the upstairs lounge or affected by these are real people, and you do an amazing job telling their story individually and then the story of the fire. And I know you'll do that with.
Oh, thank you. No, that was the goal with Tinderbox. As I really wanted people to meet the individuals who would be at the significant place at the significant time when the significant event happens, the fire on June 24th, 1973 at the upstairs lounge. But I wanted like readers to feel that what was happening, that they'd fallen in love with one of the people who if they didn't know the person was going to survive or not, and how they felt whatever was transpiring was consequential emotionally. Because that's how it happened for people who lost a brother or who lost a father. It was emotionally consequential. So I'm grateful that you said that, because I really wanted people to connect with someone who was there.
Well, you do an amazing job with that in the book. And then by bringing it kind of back into the public eye, and we're connecting it, you make some of these connections, but like the world is making these connections now. Like, oh, look. Like you said, Pulse Upstairs Lounge. These connections are being made, and people know about this history. And I can't wait to read what you write. What is Jones Committee?
The Johns Committee.
John's Committee. The John's Committee.
I named the victims. I've decensored. I found the key to I found documents no one's supposed to find of the lists of fired teachers that were sent out of state to other states. So I found the lists, and I've decensored. And my book will be one of the first books to really expeditiously name all the victims. And I'm really working hard to not have any of the victims' names be censored, such that the families of these victims can know what happened to their ancestor or to their current, odds are that it's a relative who's deceased now, because this happened in the 50s and these people were in their 20s. So that meant someone would be in their 90s now. Right. But, and also raise awareness. And also, if they want to, muckrake a little bit, having to do with these civil rights violations, et cetera, take steps. Take steps. But exactly. Yeah, thank you. I really do hope that that the Johns Committee becomes more known, and people understand how and why these anti-queer movements surface, and why they seem to come out of Florida and then wash across the rest of the country.
Well, I would love to know that. So if you really do find that piece of the information out, why they start there and move across, I can't wait to hear that. But yeah, I do hope that it gives light to the past and brings that history kind of forward and lets us see the connection that we're living in right now.
Yeah. So I agree. It's important to know the trends and currents that are moving through your life. And this is one of them that I think a lot of us have been oblivious to. Exactly. I don't want to direct this to, I want to talk about books I've been reading too.
Okay. I would love to hear about books you've been reading. I am super into it. Pen and paper ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So when I write about really heavy nonfiction stuff, and I'm document deep. And that means when I pleasure read, I don't read nonfiction. I can't. It's too close to what I'm already doing, and I'm already emotionally impacted by what I've learned that day, by what I'm struggling with, by what I'm trying to put in a way that such that a reader can emotionally connect with. So I almost always read either speculative fiction or science fiction. Serious stuff. So the stuff I have a stack of books I've read that were on my bedstand when I wrote this current book. And one of my favorite authors is who I always go to because she could do sci-fi and fantasy is Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yes.
I love that her sci-fi series, the Hainish Chronicles, Left Hand of Darkness, etc., are amazing. They're she creates these little societies that have issues with it. She creates a society, then she'll diagnose a social issue inside of it, and then she'll play out what happens in terms of tyranny or what happens in terms of development. And this is at enough of a remove for me from the real world that my brain and my heart isn't hurt. And I'm still engaging with beautiful language. She's an amazing writer. Do you like Ursula K. Le Guin? Have you read her?
I do. And that's actually the first one of hers that I read. And it was one of those ones where I knew she was good, but just hadn't gotten around to it. And then I read Left Hand of Darkness and went, well, this is what everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously. And now I've read
it's gorgeous. And there's even a moment of political sacrifice in it that you tear up where you're and I try to explain why it's happening. No, the man of the ecumens. But when you try to explain it, I sound like such a nerd to my husband, why I'm crying. I can't even explain it because it's in the context of her society that she's built. But it's gorgeous. And then I love the Earthsea books that she wrote. It's supposed to be kids fantasy, but I love them. They're her little mage school that she created, and how I just think she does such a fabulous job spooling out a society, a sea-based society where there's islands and magic is real inside of it, and let's go that kind of thing. Have you read Earthsea?
I have, and those books are great to just fall into. You say, they're so well written, and they just sort of take you away. Yes, exactly.
Okay, do you like N.K. Jemisin?
Okay, I've not read that.
She's
So,
like speculative fiction now. She did like this is the sequel to like 100,000 Kingdoms or something like that. I'm probably getting it wrong. You know, it is 100,000 Kingdoms. So
it's
this is
100,000.
yeah, this is her like this was her first trilogy before she did the Broken Earth trilogy, which is just that's just like, oh my God, like the most emotional, gorgeous. Have you read?
I haven't read that.
It's like so worth it. Okay. She like, again, it's like a beautiful writing, amazing world building and creation. In this context, it's like a sort of pagan society where there are gods at war with each other and people trying to sort out what's happening. And there's a lot of like sex, and it's gorgeous erotica writing in it too, where you're like, should I be liking this? Like, is it okay that there's this much sex in it? And it's profound. I mean, like, I found this, it's not just escapism because she's such a gorgeous writer. Like I wish I wish I could write a book as good as any of the trilogy in the Broken Earth trilogy. Like, and I feel like N.K. Jemisin, she's like a MacArthur Genius Fellow or something like that. Well deserved. She's like changing her genre and elevating her genre and making people take fantasy more seriously as a literary form.
Absolutely. So I would definitely, from a bookselling point of view, like being able to see that N.K. Jemisin has made people pay attention.
Yeah.
In a way that you didn't see. Stuffy, classic. People would think of, that, or very fluffy and, just pure entertainment. And she has brought that, changed that for sure.
Yep. Yes. All right. I can do a few more, or like, you can tell me to stop. Like,
no, I mean, I want to know. So if you're in, I'm in. I'm putting the links for everybody.
I love Octavia Butler, and I read Parable of the Sower, and I loved it. And then Parable of the Talents, like I started getting through, and I had to pause it because like it got a little too close to life. Well, I was like, because in Parable of the Talents, there's like a political figure from Texas who runs for this and it's this post dystopian post collapse of the United States. He runs for the presidency with the phrase "Make America Great Again." And like this book was written it was published before Trumpism. And she was granted that was like Reagan's phrase. This is from 1998. And again, it's like this sort of I would call it a kind of science fiction, but it's sort of just like it's more just dystopian fiction, a little bit farther into the future. And Octavia Butler's a brilliant writer, and she not just is it this dystopian vision she provides, and stories of injustice or what societal collapse actually looks like, which is why most of us shouldn't really ask for revolutions because what happens afterwards is really scary. But what it shows is the main character through epistolary relationships and diary entries and things like that. It shows the development of this new kind of earth-based religion that then takes hold or takes seed, and becomes influential in humanity's next step. It's about hope amidst the chaos before the next step occurs. And have you read Parable of the Sower?
Yeah, I've read those. And Octavia Butler is another one that I didn't read for a really long time, just never got to the top of my TBR. Yeah. And then of course, as soon as I did, I'm like, again, okay, everyone is right. Let's do this.
Yeah. I was so on board for and I just had to pause. But then once after January 6th, and after that, after the swearing in, I was like, I need to finish this. And so I just dug in and did it. And I was like, you know what? Okay. It's not mirroring exactly life now. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Well, that's the part again, is that it's so believable because sure. I mean, that's not too far off from what I see right in front of me. And that makes it, it makes it kind of harder to read, but also I feel like a better.
Yeah.
If you can get over the fear, then you're.
I know. If it gets too close to reality, I feel almost psychologically stabbed. Like, because like I'm like at home in my domesticity with my husband, and I've spent all day long writing this nonfiction book about, to be real, bad people who do terrible things to innocent folks and get away with it. And that's a hard thing to live with while you're writing a book. And so like while I'm reading, it's not, I'm reading to enjoy language, but if the material gets so close to what I've been dealing with all day, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I've talked this through with my counselor. It's okay that I can't. I don't know. I just am not able to.
No, because at that point you're not working. You want to be entertained. You want the quality to be good, but you're off the clock. You need to be entertained. It's like, I imagine rom-coms and more, like you're just like, yes, Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler, do your thing. I know how this is going to end, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and if it poses dilemmas and it shows injustice, if it's in the context of a human experiment or like the author's experiment, or a game, that's different for me, and somehow releases the pressure for me in a way where I can tangle with those notions in the same way that I couldn't if it was like a book about even a fictional depiction, of contemporary sex trafficking or something like that. On a daily basis, I couldn't handle that. Why? Because I wrote about sad shit all day.
Like what? I need away from that.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that's perfectly fair.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So can I do next one?
Oh yeah. Do one more.
I like William Gibson. He's like a sci-fi writer. Have you read any William Gibson?
I have not, but I know him, but I haven't.
He wrote the book Neuromancer, and he invented the term cyberspace, and he like pioneered this sort of writing, which was called cyberpunk, which is almost like a Blade Runner, Han Solo-esque view of looking at, the future. And this is Burning Chrome. So this is his short fiction, where the first book in his short fiction is this story called Johnny Mnemonic, which was what they made that 90s Keanu Reeves movie out of. Yeah. But the short story is much better.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, he's an amazing writer. He does great, like almost like cowboy sci-fi, where it's gritty and it depicts a lot of people that are part of the underclasses. And again, gorgeous, beautiful, stylized writing. And in addition to this, he'll sometimes come closer to home, where he'll do like sci-fi or intrigue or psyops books. Like post 9/11, he had this trilogy that he did, starting with the book Pattern Recognition, which was all about essentially all about spies and intrigue in modern life. And he did 3 books about those, but it was written in the same cyberpunk, like modern cowboy gritty tone. And it was good. It was really, so I enjoy reading this immensely. Can I do one more? I tell people I for some reason can read James Baldwin. I don't know why. He deals with difficult topics. I read Giovanni's Room. I read Another Country. I reread Go Tell It on a Mountain. I've read The Fire Next Time. I'm like, If Beale Street Could Talk, I'm in the midst of it. I can read, and for some reason it's okay. James Baldwin, I feel like he's it's historically at enough of a remove, maybe. I don't know why, but I feel like he parses materials, and I for my money, like I honestly think he was like probably in top 5 greatest writers of the 20th century. I don't know how he didn't win a Nobel Prize or a Pulitzer, maybe racism and homophobia.
I mean, I can think of a few reasons why no one put him on a list, but they should have.
It's sad because he's like, this man can spin a sentence. This man can make you cry. This like in Go Tell It on the Mountain, his first book. I'm not into like religious books or anything like that. And there's this sequence involving like this boy on like a Christian threshing floor of a church where he's having this like hallucinatory God experience. And I'm into it. Like the way it's almost like Hunter S. Thompson. The way he describes this stuff is so amazing. And the way he describes, I guess, a queer underclass, I really like. And I love Giovanni's Room always breaks my heart, but like I can read it and reread it. And he was a master. And I think like if you read Baldwin, you'll become a better writer. And that's like, I think if you read Ursula K. Le Guin, you'll become a better writer too, but Baldwin especially.
Absolutely. And Baldwin, all of his books are pretty much that short. I mean,
how
he
not fair.
Weaves an amazing story, and the language is always beautiful, and they're in under 200 pages. I mean, they're close to that, and that those are, first of all, my kind of books. But
Yeah.
second of all, I mean, it's amazing. I'm not going to say anybody can do it in 800, but look,
Right.
if you've got 800 pages, you can put it all in there. Just
Right.
throw it at the wall and it's going to stick for somebody if they make it through all 800 pages. But,
Yeah.
but to pack it all into 180.
Yeah. And his chops as a writer were amazing. He can flashback and you'll forget it's a flashback, then bring you back from a flashback, and then he'll flash forward and you won't know, and you'll forget he's doing it.
Yep.
And then this has happened before. He'll put a flashback and then a flash forward and a flashback back to flash. Like, the man had skills. And like that I can't even do. Like, I don't know how he arranged it, organized it. I don't know if he plotted it out or if this was just all intuitive. But I feel like I tell a lot of other writers to read Baldwin and to study Baldwin.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one that you can, enjoy if you're just flipping through the pages, right? You're just trying to get to the end of the story, but also absolutely like dig into, and where is he going? How did he get here? What is he doing? Like, I love James Baldwin.
And he'll violate rules. Like, in another country, he introduces you to a main character, and sorry for a plot spoiler for people who haven't read, but like, then he'll kill the main character off. And then you're like, well, where does he go from there's so much book left. And then he'll introduce you to all the characters' friends and they become the main character. And like, he's able to do things that a few other authors are able to do successfully.
Yes, successfully, for sure. It works. Somehow when he does it, it works.
Yeah. Can I ask what you've been reading?
You can. So I put some of my books, I did not prepare a stack, but I have some of my books that I've been reading. Actually, these two are kids' books, but they are ones that I've read very recently. When Sea Becomes Sky comes out in March, comes out very soon. This book snuck up on me. Like, it's technically, I don't even, maybe it's middle grade. It says middle grade on the back, but I did not see this coming. I read this book as a manuscript early to blurb it, and I'm sitting here and I finish it. When the thing happens, I'm like, oh my God. And there's no one's read it. I can't tell anyone, right? Like, I mean, a small group of other booksellers that got this manuscript to blurb it. That's the only people who have read this. I don't know who they are. Instantly, I am like, I'm emailing, the publisher. I'm like, oh my gosh, who? Just give me the name of someone else who I know. I've got to have known them. I have to know some of the people that have read this. And so I'm like, DMing just these like two other booksellers.
Yeah.
And I happened to go last year. I went to Children's Institute, and the author was there, and I like beelined across the room to her, and I was like, you don't understand how hard this has been, like the last like 5 months, because I haven't been able to talk to it. And she just stood up and gave me a hug. She's like, I know, me too.
Oh my gosh.
That's like amazing.
That is true though. When a work touches you in that way, you sort of seek out another as a support system, but also as like a way to like for you both to agree that something special has happened.
Exactly. And I really can't wait for it to come out and I can actually like give it to people. But also it's like, I think it snuck up on me because I may have taken it for granted. Like, as a middle grade book, I was like, well, I got this. I know where this is going. Once I got into the story and I was enjoying it and I really liked it and all of the stuff, but I was sure I was sure. And then I was wrong. And I was like, no way. Like, that rarely happens. It's a rare thing to happen in an adult fiction, but then like in a middle grade or YA or elementary, like I was like, wow. So I recommend When Sea Becomes Sky to everybody, adults, kids. Y'all gonna love it. Everybody's gonna love it.
I'm gonna check it out. I'm really excited to be one of the people. And then I don't know. If it happens for me in that same way, can I seek you out? Like,
please.
Okay.
Please, yes. In fact, yes, I would love to. Because again, now I've talked to a few people, but it's still not out for the public yet. So I haven't really like been able to like super interact with a bunch of people that have read it yet, but I'm not the only one. I do know that at this point. There are other people now, you know, that have the arc and so.
Yes.
And then She's a Haunting. This is not the final cover. I don't have the final cover because it doesn't come out until the end of February either. But these are the two things I'm reading. I'm sorry, I don't have like I didn't prepare my stack, but
no, it's cool. And then you're just so cool. You're reading books that we don't all have access to yet.
I know. Do you want to see something cooler than that? But it's like not very humble.
What's not humble? I want to see, of course.
See my name?
Yeah.
I'm on the book.
You got blurb. You blurbed.
I blurbed a book. I know.
That's great.
So I like it. It's the bottom. I do like it. It's a horror novel. But which I don't read a lot of. One of the reasons though I really love this is because I learned so much about Vietnam. The main character needs her dad has moved back to Vietnam. She's Vietnamese American and her parents are from Vietnam. Her mom's in America and her dad has moved back to Vietnam. Like he's been there for like 3 or 4 years. Okay. And she, between high school and college, is going to go visit her dad and spend the summer with him. And turns out the house that he has purchased to turn into a boutique hotel is haunted. But he has teamed up with some white people who have helped to invest, and their interest is very different than his interest.
Oh.
And so there is a lot. I learned so much about French colonial Vietnam, how Vietnamese have been dealing with and the repercussions of that colonialism.
Wow.
And so I would hit on these things that I wouldn't understand, not inside the context of the fictional narrative. That is amazing. But there's a thing I was like, I wonder why. Clearly I'm supposed to know about that, right? And I go and Google it and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I learn all about these historical things that have occurred that
That's amazing.
Culturally for Vietnamese and Vietnamese Americans, this is a seamless thing. They just know. So I loved that. At no point was it dumbed down, or she was not placating to me. This was a seamless story and I loved it so much. The haunted house is what I was supposed to be paying attention to, which I was, and it's great. And that is kind of creepy and scary and all overcoming that piece of it. But the piece that really made me love it is that I feel like I learned a lot, which you don't have to. If you want to just read it, it's a beautiful story and I loved it. But if you are the type of person like I am, I'm assuming you are with your research, like you hit something and you're like, I need to know about this.
Yeah.
You can go down Google rabbit holes. And I think I learned more about like the Vietnam War, repercussions of the Vietnam War, French colonialism, the colonialism in Vietnam than I have maybe ever before.
I'd love to dig into that.
So,
what was the last Vietnam book I've read? Well, it's like probably one of the more famous ones. Neil Sheehan's A Bright Shining Lie, which is a nonfiction book, but I read that before I started working on my second book, which is about John Paul Vann, who's supposedly the American G.I. Joe who was involved from end to end in the Vietnam debacle and who died in Vietnam after the American exit from Saigon while trying to wrangle North Vietnamese forces. And it was like, it's this famous, the reason the book is famous is because it tells the whole story of the war through one flawed person, very flawed person. And it starts with, it's like the ultimate gimmick. It starts with John Paul Vann's funeral, and then it ends with, it's like a spiral staircase, and it ends with the author visiting John Paul Vann's gravesite in Vietnam.
Right.
And I liked the amount of history he provided, battle sequences, etc. And I did feel like the glimpses where I would learn more. I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna. What's the title? I feel like I'm gonna read this book you blurbed. She is a hunting. I'm going to
She's
read
a haunting.
this book.
Yeah, I actually put the link right there so you can go back and grab it later.
I'm going to read this book. I feel like I really want a more indirect take that's going to inspire me to learn, to figure out more about this fascinating country and culture, and then this terrible lineage of occupation.
Right.
Terrible and like multinational occupation.
Yes, and then they moved to America to start this new life, but then at some point, the parents are they have their own like marital issues, but the dad is like, I don't know how to make it here. So he goes back. And so that's whole story. All right. Yeah. And then like that and then he needs help with the money to put the hotel together. And so who shows up? But so, a white couple that wants to invest in, and he takes the money because of course that's where the money is. That's right. The capital for the business that you want. And there we go. So yeah. There's a lot. There's so much to unpack. Like just a fiction book, whatever.
Those are great recommendations.
Well, I have one last question for you. We talked about this new book you're working on. What's our timeline? When does anybody get to see it?
I finished the draft manuscript on Martin Luther King Day. And then so now I'm doing my own edits, and then it's going to be a process where hopefully I want it to come out in 2024 in the midst of the political cage match. To hopefully to arrest that conversation and like put this skunk and make people ponder and think about Florida's role in national intolerance a little bit more. And I think it's going to be really important, actually, not the book, but this conversation. Because in that moment, because I think more and more that state dictates this country's future. I don't know. It's like, it's so bizarre that it all comes from there. And we even have jokes about Florida Man. Yeah. And then I know tons of people from Chicago that retire there and still complain about it.
Right. And that's part of the thing. Oh my gosh. I feel like we can keep talking about this. But yes, it's part of the whole thing. I have seen political ads in Florida when I was visiting my family just a few years ago. And this person's, and I don't remember their name, so it doesn't matter. But this person's platform in this commercial was, hey, I'm from Pennsylvania. It was great there. Let me make Florida like that. Vote for me. And I was all like, whose political campaign is the place I came from is better than this crap hole. Let's make it more like Pennsylvania. And I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, I guess, but I assume he thought that was going to work for him. Maybe it did. I don't know. Yeah. But that is a strange place where you move there and you literally tell everyone you want to make it like somewhere else that isn't from here. And that's your shtick. Like that's what you're running on.
Oftentimes, yeah, it is considered this sort of, even though it's naturally beautiful and it's gorgeous. Like, I don't know, but you can bring hell wherever you live, obviously, as people have. But like, for generations in that state. But like, yeah, there's this whole myth that it's this tabula rasa and this dream of like a family home in a semi-tropical setting beneath a palm tree. And I can invent my own dream and manifest it here. And to hell with all of you that don't believe me. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay. Like I said, I feel like I could talk to you all night. We could keep going. But we'll wrap it up for the sake of, the job. Mm-hmm. But I can't wait to read bits of this new book when it comes out.
Thank you.
And I'm putting a link in the comments, everybody. You can grab signed copies of Tinderbox at this link through our website or come in, give us a call. We have them on our shelf now. And Bobby, it was great talking to you.
Thank you. This was fun. I really liked it.
Amazing. Me too. And thanks everybody for tuning in.